All right, good morning everyone, and thank you for being here. I know it's a little early. Now, when I started at Chef as an engineer 4 years ago, it was the first time in my career that I was paid to write open source software full-time. And at the time, I tweeted this: one of the reasons I'm excited and a little nervous about working on open source full-time for Chef is the entire world, or at least the Chef world, will notice if I get it wrong. Then Noah Kantrowitz, a prominent Chef community member, tweeted back at me. He said, "Not if, but when. You get used to your failures being public, fix them, and move on. There is work to be done." Now, this not only brought me some comfort, knowing that I'm not alone, but also some inspiration. I realized that even if I do get something wrong and the whole world sees it, that also means the whole world is there to help. Open source development does involve being vulnerable, but it is a shared vulnerability. We are all in this together, creating software in the public eye and learning as we go. But with that vulnerability, there is a phenomenal feeling of connection, of learning and building together as a community that I consider the absolute best part of open source and the absolute best part of Chef. Now, along with being the best part, it's also the most important part. Because Chef the product, Chef the business, Chef the everything else it is, would not exist without our open source community. Our community built the foundation upon which every part of Chef stands. When our community is successful, we are successful. When our community thrives, we thrive. Now, Chef makes amazing technology, but that's not what makes our open source community so good. It's the way the humans who create and use that technology interact with each other that makes our community magical. Now, something that amazes me about our open source community is that every single one of us knows when one of us succeeds, we all succeed. We build with each other's successes. We build on each other's successes. We celebrate each other's successes, knowing that when one member of the community succeeds, we all succeed. Now, I sometimes take a moment and I think back to my engineering jobs at previous tech companies. Every night and every weekend, I would have this cloud of doom and gloom hovering over my head, dreading what I was going to find at work in the morning. Who else here has experienced that? All right, we got a few hands up. Well, Chef is the first organization I've worked for where I don't have the cloud of doom hovering over my head, because I know no matter what I find in the morning, I will not be facing it alone. I not only have the entire company behind me, I have the entire Chef open source community at my back. That is the power of community. None of us ever have to walk alone. None of us ever have to code alone. Now, before we go further into open source at Chef, particularly the recent business model change you may have heard about, let's briefly cover who I am. I'm Nell Shamrell-Harrington. I'm principal software engineer at Chef Software. I'm also the community engineering lead. Outside of Chef, I'm on the board of directors of Operation Code, which you'll hear a tiny more about at the end of this talk. I am also a longtime open source contributor and maintainer. If you want to tweet at me, it's at Nell Shamrell. All right. So I am here today talking about how having a community is vital for Chef. But it's not just important to Chef. Community is absolutely mandatory to every business and every industry. The technical problems we face as organizations, industries, governments, even as humanity itself, are impossible to solve alone. The stakes are just too high not to code together, to collaborate and build upon each other's work. We not only need more software to solve the problems we face, we need better quality software, and open source communities produce better software. When we develop software as a community, we expand our reach of experiences. Bigger and smaller companies, bigger and smaller teams, different industries, different cultures, different values, and different needs. We bring in perspectives we never would have considered otherwise. Now, I learned this firsthand when I was an engineer on the Chef supermarket project. I learned I needed to make some changes to it to make it work in an air-gapped environment. Now, this need had never even occurred to me before, but I learned it is mission critical for many organizations to be able to operate software in environments without internet access. Now, this input came directly from a community member. Without it, we would have missed out on a massive user base that needs Supermarket, that needs a place to share chef cookbooks and tools and build on each other's successes, especially in these air-gapped environments. Now I do everything I can to ensure every piece of code I write can be used in multiple environments, with or without internet access, to serve as much of our open source community as possible. Our community members were the ones who showed me how important this is. Perspectives from the chef community are coded into every one of our products because we know more eyes on the code, more perspectives, and more contributions make better software. Better software and better community mean we have a bigger impact across industries and across the world. And as our SVP of Product and Engineering, Corey Scobie, recently said, the best way to build software is to do it in close collaboration with the people who use it. Now, we at Chef know the right way to build software. However, building a business on top of creating open source software is a whole nother challenge, one that has become especially relevant over the past couple of years. GeekWire has led the way in the press coverage of this struggle. Now, this has led some people to ask, is open source a sustainable business model? Well, my answer to this question is open source is not itself a business model. It's a way of maintaining and building software. However, the way we apply open source software to our businesses certainly is a type of model, a model that, for most of us at least, is still in the experimental stages. So previously at Chef, we used an open core business model. This meant the code bases for our core products, Chef Infra, Inspec, and Habitat, these were all open source under Apache 2.0. Now, additionally, when we created builds from this code, we also distributed them under that same Apache 2.0 license. Now, certain additions to the core products, things like Chef Automate, these were closed source. If you wanted to use a build of the Automate code, you had to have a commercial relationship with Chef. So the idea behind this model was that as people found value in the core products, they would then want to pay for the premium add-ons to those products. However, the problem we found, for us at least, is this model incentivized us as a business to keep more of our code closed because closed source was where we made our money. Additionally, when it came time to decide where to put headcount and other resources, again, we were highly incentivized as a business to put them on the closed source products rather than the open source ones. Now, for us at Chef, this model introduced complexities that we knew were holding us back from creating the business and the open source community we knew we wanted to. Something had to change. And this led us to make our bold leap into our new model, where all of our major product code is open source under Apache 2.0. Rather than trying to close more of our code, we went the opposite direction and made our code more open. Now, this was one big change. The other big change was around the builds that Chef software created from these open source code bases. These builds, which are warrantied and indemnified, are now distributed under a new commercial license. Now, we knew going in that this would be a very big and very controversial change, and we would not have even considered it without a very good reason. The reason we did this is now all of our major products generate the same value while also getting the benefits of being open source. This means that tension around whether to put resources on the closed source products versus the open source products is gone. We are now incentivized to spend resources on all of our products, which benefits everyone who uses them. Now, along with changes to how we code and distribute builds of that code, this new model also involves some changes to how we operated as an open source community. So we used to have 3 distinct open source communities, one for Chef, one for Inspec, and one for Habitat, one for each of our major open source products. And each of these had its own system of governance, and this was intentional. We felt having separate communities would make it less likely that they would be competing with each other. Now, this did work well for a time, but then we had to figure out what to do when we added Automate to our open source profile. Having 3 systems of governance was straining enough. Adding in a 4th one would have been too much. we realized we needed a consistent and efficient system of governance for all of our open source projects. Chef has over 1,000 of them. We needed a simplified way to manage them, a way with less overhead for all involved. And this led us to create the Chef Book of Open Source, which is available for anyone to view on GitHub. This book defines how we do open source Chef at a technical level, as well as how we function as an open source community. And when I say community, I mean both internal Chef staffers and external to Chef community members. It is effectively a collaboration on how to collaborate in open source. Now, the reason we put this book on GitHub is it is a living document. We are iterating on it as we go along, as we learn and grow with our community. If you would like to work with us and walk with us on this journey, please reach out, open an issue, open a pull request, talk to us. We would love to have you involved. We'd also love for people in other open source communities to try out the practices in this book and let us know what works for you and what doesn't. Now, we knew from the beginning we could not create this book of open source without involving our community, but we also had to keep the book private before we announced our business model change. So several months before the announcement, we started creating this book in a private GitHub repo. And we brought in select community members from across our open source communities to brief them on the business model change, the open core to all open source, and ask for their feedback on the book, because we knew our community members would see things that we wouldn't. They responded to GitHub issues, they opened pull requests with edits, and much more. And then on April 2nd, the day we announced the business model change and our new way of doing open source, we made the GitHub repo public for all to see, and all to open issues, open pull requests, and more. Now, there was quite a bit of press around this, which you may have seen, and a question nearly everyone asked me is, what if there's a fork or alternative distribution created for your products? Well, this isn't new to Chef. This has always been a risk with our open source projects. Someone forking one of our repos is nothing new to us. So rather than trying to fight this, we chose to embrace it, embrace the possibility of community forks and distributions from the beginning. And how we did this is we do require alternative forks or distributions to remove all of Chef's trademarks from the code. And this is because we want to make sure there is no confusion in the marketplace about which distributions come from Chef and which distributions come from other sources. So we provided initial guidelines to our community on how to do this, and we've been expanding them as we've received feedback, as people have started the process of creating alternative distributions and have encountered edge cases that we never thought of before. Now, community distributions are community-driven and community-supported. Chef only provides commercial support for our commercial distributions. Now, that said, Chef engineers have been involved with the community distro, including myself, from the beginning. We provide consulting to our community members. And the great thing is it has forced us to clarify our coding and building processes in ways we never had before. This has been hugely beneficial, both in forcing us to document how our software works and spreading that information around so it doesn't just live in one person's head. Now, the biggest outcome of the community distribution process so far is the decision to use the same code base for both the commercial and the community distribution, rather than having the community do a hard fork. This means Chef engineers and our community contributors all have their hands in the same code base. We don't compete with our community with code. We collaborate with our community through code and improve the code base for all to come. Our open source code bases have already improved significantly as a result of this. And when the business model change was announced, there were several questions that came up again and again. Oh, whoops, can we go back? Oh, I can go back a slide. Hey, and the biggest one was, what is it going to be named? There was a lot of debate around this in our community. So the ones we know of now, the community fork of Chef is called Sank for Chef, or Sank is not Chef. Our community distribution of Habitat is called Biome, and there is work going on community distribution of Inspec and of Automate. Those names are to be determined. Now, some other questions that came up included, why didn't Chef itself create the community distribution? Now, when people ask this, they often cite how CentOS is a part of Red Hat, at least it is now. the thing that's important to remember is CentOS was not always a part of Red Hat. It existed for about 10 years before Red Hat took it under its wing. And it had to prove itself as a community-driven project. It had to prove that it was viable before Red Hat would consider taking it under its wing. Now, I could see Chef at some point take the community distributions under its umbrella, but we need to see them be viable first. Now, this doesn't mean it will take 10 years, but it does need to be a significant amount of time. Additionally, one thing we knew from the beginning was we wanted any alternative distribution to come from the community, not from Chef. Before we made the big announcement, we didn't know who, if anyone, would want to take on the project of creating an alternative distribution. In order to reach all the people who might possibly want to be a part of it, we needed the announcement to be public before work on this community distribution could get started. As much as we would have loved to bring our whole community in under NDA, that wasn't possible. So since the announcement, several community members, as well as members of Oregon State University's Open Source Lab, have volunteered and started driving the community distributions forward, and there's much more to come from them. Now, another question people have asked is if the open source code bases contain community contributions and Chef creates commercial distributions from this code base, doesn't that mean Chef is making money off the work of its community? Well, the short answer to this is yes. We do recognize that contributions of code do have monetary value. And we are willing to provide something of monetary value in return through our contributor entitlement program, which offers a significant discount on Chef licenses if someone is a contributor to our open source projects. Now, if you'd like to see more about this program, check out blog.chef.io. The pinned post from Corey Scobie features this program extensively. Now, the next question I've encountered is, what if when the community distribution becomes viable, if it becomes viable, why would anyone pay for Chef's commercial distributions if they can get the community one for free? And the answer to this is when you pay Chef for a license, you're not just buying a software build. Chef's distributions are warrantied and indemnified, which is very important to many enterprise companies. Additionally, commercial customers also receive premium support directly from Chef. That support, that access to Chef's minds is part of the commercial relationship as well. Now, executing this business model change, which is still ongoing, was a massive effort, but we see it as a very worthy investment because, again, open source communities create better software, which means more open source software is better for both Chef the business and all of our customers. Now, additionally, more open source software is better for our community. It allows more interaction between Chef's internal engineers and external contributors. It allows us to learn from each other and build on each other's knowledge and experience. And it's not just the Chef community that benefits. The effects of healthy open source communities are felt far and wide. Now, one of my greatest joys through my 4+ years at Chef has been taking the lessons I learned in our open source community and bringing them to the Operation Code community. Operation Code is a nonprofit which teaches software engineering skills to the military community. This includes active duty service members, veterans, and their families. And one of the ways we teach is through running real open source projects. One of the best things we can give someone in our program is that real-world demonstrable coding experience on their GitHub profile that they can bring to potential employers. Now, I've taken a lot of the lessons I learned from Chef and applied them to Operation Code. This means members of our program, they not only learn how to code, they also learn how to contribute to maintain and govern open source projects. They learn how to mentor new contributors and improve our projects for all involved and all to come. It's a virtuous cycle that keeps on giving. Now, additionally, just as I have applied lessons from my work at Chef to Operation Code, I've also brought lessons from Operation Code back to Chef. In particular, this one. The idea that we as a community hold ourselves to a higher standard in the work we do, a higher standard in how we interact with each other, a higher standard in how we build technology together as humans. Working together in the open online can be very hard. I think anyone who's done open source has experienced this. But what we have as an open source community, this ability we have, all of us, is to raise the bar for the Chef and Operation Code communities and all open source communities across the world. Again, with communities, we are never alone. We never code alone. We never walk alone. This is a journey that we all walk together. So here's my challenge for every single one of you in this audience. Hold yourself to a higher standard in every bit of code you commit, in every message you write, in every interaction you have. Let's lead the open source world together in a positive direction. The world needs us to do this. Because again, the problems we face are impossible to solve alone. But as we solve them together, we improve organizations, we improve businesses, we improve industries, we improve governance, and ultimately we improve human lives. With communities, again, especially open source communities, none of us ever have to walk this journey alone. Thank you. Oh yeah, I'm open to some questions. I can't see though, so I'll need someone else to spot them.
Okay, so we do have a little bit of time for questions. I first want to say what a fascinating talk. As somebody who works for a company who's traditionally known for closed source commercial versions, who's just made a fairly significant acquisition into open source world with the purchase of NGINX, this is just amazing. I think the different business models matching the different ways of doing things, it's just such an exciting time to work out how to do things right in this world. So if anyone has a question for Nell, there's someone's already found the microphone at the beginning.
Oh, fantastic.
There we go.
You're in a white shirt. I can see you. Yep.
Okay. So how do you keep your core code from getting contributions that are licensed under a variety of different licenses, thereby causing you to have to keep track of a million different things? I mean, I get that you're making it all available, so you're not concerned about that, but how do you account for what people contribute in those terms?
We require anyone who contributes to use developer certificate of origin. That means they sign all of their commits saying they accept that this code is going to be used as part of an Apache 2 licensed code base. So that it is covered in the signs that we have people do for each commit and in the Apache 2.0 license itself. Any other questions? All right, well, I'll be around over here if you've got more questions or want to talk. Thank you for being here, and thank you for listening to my talk.